Hey, good morning, guys. So, a couple of things before we get started today. One, you have an exam tomorrow, meaning that you have an exam tomorrow. Second, if you have any open assessments on Edulastic, please make sure you take those. Those are exit tickets, they're pretty important in your grade. And then here's my last reminder to you is that grades are due tomorrow at the end of the day. Your report cards, they go into IC. There's nothing more we can do about it after that. They're just done. It's final. So, and your exam tomorrow will be on it because I'm going to stay up late in grading. So please make sure you're getting in any assessments on Edulastic, any missing work, get it turned in because I will work really hard to make sure that gets reflected in your grade. But take your test tomorrow. It's going to be important. There's going to be no video, no lesson. You'll just go straight to Edulastic and I'll post it on the website. All right. Well, let's get started for today then. So, as you know from your learning target, you are going to be working on writing a summary today. Now, I know you've been working on summaries in Miss Jessica's class a lot, but we're going to focus on summarizing a nonfiction text, right? Because this is your history class. We read about stories that actually happened. And the way we summarize those things can be a little bit different than the way we summarize our books, our fiction books in Miss Jessica's class. So we'll get through that today. This is kind of the last skill we'll be working on before your test. And then we'll start quarter two next week and we'll start studying way, way, way back in time. So I'm excited to see you guys next week. I'm going to miss you. Let's get started for today. All right. So you're going to be working on summarizing the Chicano Civil Rights Movement here in Denver, actually. Well, in Colorado, but a lot of here in Denver and the surrounding areas. So the very first thing you'll see today other than this video, is just a little slideshow with some pictures. I'm sure some of you guys saw this in PAC because we did a little discussion around this in PAC, but just to kind of keep your brain thinking on the right track. So the first thing you'll see today is some pictures. The next thing we're going to be looking at is political, economic, geographic, and social, our PEGs. This is really important because today when we're writing our summary, our who, what, where, when, and why, for your why, you're going to give me a political reason, an economic reason, a geographic reason, and a social reason. So your why is actually 4 sentences. And this will be a little bit more clear when we start getting into the assignment itself. Here's the text that you will be summarizing. I'm going to go ahead and do a read through of this so that you can come back and listen if you need to. Before I do that, I want to show you, just like in Miss Jessica's, you're going to have a who, what, where, when, and why boxes. And then you're going to create your summary using these sentence stems. Many who were doing what were they doing, during when, what time period did this take place, in where, I already told you we're studying mostly about Colorado, and then because this is your why. So they were, right, Chicanos were protesting, right? I can see that from the pictures here in Colorado, when I'll get from the text, and then why I need to get from the text too. And remember, I'm looking for 4 reasons: a political reason, geographic reason, a social reason, and a political reason. Okay, here's our text for today. It's nicely segmented in these with subheadings. So each subheading is a different topic, a different part of the movement. And so it gives you a kind of an idea before you even start reading what it's going to be about. And I'm just going to start right here with Introduction to the Chicano Civil Rights Movement in Denver. During the 1960s and 70s, I think I just found my when. During the 1960s and 70s, the Chicano Civil Rights Movement grew in Denver with the mission of achieving Mexican-American empowerment. Major goals of the movement included better education for Chicano students, rights for workers, and more political representation, and an end to discrimination and police brutality. The Kitamaya Carnation Strike. A strike is when workers stop working and start fighting against their bosses for better treatment at work. The Katamaya Carnation Strike. In July of 1968, so in the 60s, a labor strike erupted at a small floral plant in Brighton, Colorado. Employees at the Kitamaya Corporation, primarily Mexican-American women, had been subjected to miserable working conditions. In addition to long hours and no overtime pay, the employees were forced to work in humid, muddy floral nursery, often leading to accidents and health complications. The women of the plant formed a union. The day after the union's first meeting, the employees were greeted with police officers posted throughout the plant. In the words of one worker, it was a police state. Despite intimidation tactics of management, the employees at the Kitamaya decided to press on. After 221 days of striking, the other women decided to call it off. Although they did not achieve every goal of theirs, the strike was relatively successful, and working conditions at the Kitamaya plant did improve. So, just to summarize here, this flower plant, carnations are a flower, had mostly Mexican American women workers there, and the conditions were really bad, so they went on strike, right? So they stopped working, they fought against their bosses, and they demanded better treatment. The walkout at West High School. On March 20th, 1969, more than 100 Chicano and Chicana students at Denver's West High School walked out of class to protest racism in their school. They felt the school was just guiding them to the military and not giving them any options for college. Additionally, a teacher had made discriminatory remarks towards a Chicano student. A few hundred students left West and crossed Elati Street to demonstrate at Sunken Gardens Park. Students then marched 3 blocks south to the now defunct Baker Junior High. They rallied more students and headed back to West. When students arrived back at West High School, the police were already there in riot gear and ready with gas masks. 26 were arrested, 11 juveniles, and at least 2 were hospitalized, including a police officer. The walkout got bigger the next day. On March 21st, 1969, as students joined from the city's schools, Manuel, Thomas, Jefferson, Lincoln, South, all came out and supported students at West High School. Members from the Students for a Democratic Society and the Black Panthers, 2 groups also involved in the Chicano civil rights movement in the 60s, joined in. At least 1,000 protesters were there. The demonstrations came to be known as blowouts. In 4 days of unrest on the west side of the city, Denver spent at least $25,000, the Rocky Mountain News reported. Students presented a list of 9 demands they wanted the social studies teachers fired. These demands included having a curriculum that incorporated the Chicano history in North America and to have more Chicano teachers, counselors, administrators, bilingual classes, and an end of the military recruitment of Chicano students. Then, Denver Public Schools Superintendent Robert D. Gilberts agreed to change the curriculum and the teaching staff. The teacher who insulted the students was not fired and instead was transferred to another school. So these West High School students in 1969, they organized a walkout because they didn't feel like they were being treated fairly in school, right? And they got other students and other organizations to come support them, and eventually they made these 9 demands. So the next section we'll talk about is called the Crusade for Justice. The Crusade for Justice was marked for being a cultural movement and a civil rights movement. The movement started in Denver, Colorado, during the year of 1965. Similar to the rest of the Chicano social movements, the Crusade for Justice focused to seek justice for Chicanos during the 1960s. The Crusade for Justice supported the student cause of the 1960s. This movement organized and participated in the wave of student walkouts of 1968 across the southwest region of the United States. So to pause, the Crusade for Justice was a movement, a Chicano civil rights movement, that was also supporting these student demonstrations. The Crusade for Justice, as well as the Mexican American Youth Organization, opposed police brutality incidents on behalf of Chicanos in the courts. Another issue that the Crusade for Justice focused on was gaining more political representation, pushing for Chicano activists to run for public office. Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, the main leader and founder of the Crusade for Justice movement, sought to keep fighting and improve the Mexican American community with the creation of the Crusade for Justice. He set a goal to establish Chicano communities under the government of the same Mexican American people. This meant having Mexican Americans in public office. Gonzalez also fought for Denver to embrace the Chicano culture and to end discrimination at schools and to incorporate Mexican American culture into higher education. Our last section is about the war in Vietnam. An important aspect of the Crusade for Justice was its strong opposition to the Vietnam War. The Crusade for Justice argued that the Vietnam War affected the Mexican American community by enlisting dozens of Chicanos into the armies of the United States to fight a war while their families back in the U.S. lived in poverty. Protesters felt the war tore apart Mexican American families by sending off their sons to fight. While the government failed to provide economically for Chicano families, many men died in the Vietnam War, and families saw no financial assistance from the government. Our soldiers returned home with no money to their name. All right, so that is our article for today. In here, there is tons of political, economic, geographic, and social reasons. So geographic is really going to be the location, and it mentions that here in the Crusade for Justice. Where's the location that this is all happening? There's lots of economic and political reasons in the War for Vietnam and the Crusade for Justice. And there's lots of economic reasons in the Quitemaya strike, right? Because that's a place of work, that's money. Social, everything about this is really social. The fact that there was a movement, the fact that people were fighting discrimination and racism and inequality, that all has to do with our society. That's all social. So you're going to take this text now and you're going to summarize it, right? Who? Chicanos. When? Grab the dates. The first paragraph gives some good ones. What were they fighting for? What were they protesting for? What did they want? Where was this happening? We know where. That's our geographic. And then why? Why did this happen? And you're going to tell me a political, an economic, a geographic, and a social reason. Here are your sentence stems. All of this will be included for you on your document, which will be on Google Classroom. Everything is due at the end of the day today. If you have any remaining time, or you are curious about learning more about any of this, I've included 4 videos here. This first one is about the West High School walkouts. This second one is about the Crusade for Justice. And this last one is about the Quitemaya strike. All super interesting, all about 10 minutes. All right, this was kind of a long video. So work hard, and I will see you next week for quarter 2. No video or Nearpod tomorrow for your lesson. You will just click social studies and it will take you straight to the Edulastic assignment. All right. Bye, everybody.